I'm Beth Guckenberger, and this is the Reckless Faith Podcast. Happy to be back today with Rob Hall, longtime friend and colleague at Back to Back Ministries. Rob, thanks for joining me. This day is some of people's favorite day.
It is. It is. This story is historical.
It's part of family lore.
It is back-to-back family lore. For those who, we reference back-to-back a lot in here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about it a ton in terms of you're the co-executive director of Back-to-Back Ministries, and you have been, since the late 90s when you and your husband Todd founded the organization. And this story, like you said, is sort of back-to-back family lore.
Yeah, it is. It is. It was a moment I could have never orchestrated, and it's a moment that God has used in my life, certainly in the life of the other people that were involved that day, and in the lives of thousands of people who've heard the story since.
Yeah, I think at the heart of the story is really about how God orchestrates things, makes divine moments out of things that we may not have seen how they were fitting together.
Yeah, there is. I love Hebrew. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love the Hebrew language. There is no word in Hebrew that would translate as coincidence, because in God's language, there is no coincidence. There is nothing that he goes, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. I'm so glad. Yeah. It's like everything is so intentional and with such great purpose that if we listen to him and step into his will, we can trust that he's going to use even the smallest of things for his glory. And this is a perfect example of every player just doing their part that day, not understanding how he was going to weave it all.
Yeah, day 17, we just jumped in. Day 17 is what kind of meat does God bring?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not intrigued by that title and haven't read today's entry yet, you'll definitely want to do that.
Yeah, I think faith the size of a mustard seed, that's just such a phrase we say in like Christendom, the idea that it's not dependent on us. It's wholly dependent on something he's already done. Like really, God, you set up a system that isn't dependent on me. There's no other system I can think of that isn't dependent on me. Like that's not dependent on how big or smart or much or this is all actually about you. And you're going to even give me faith that I need in order to believe you. He's done that all the way back since Abraham. So on this day, when you have a 4-year-old orphan who believed in something, who asked God for something, trusting he was going to do it, you don't really get faith smaller than a 4-year-old orphan. That's as small as you possibly can get.
Not a whole lot of things that they're imagining.
No,
right?
My gosh. And how much God came through for him that day. And I thought for a long time the story was about Joel and was about Carlos. But as the story has continued to play itself out in the after effects of it in my life, I realized today it's actually about Edgar. And Edgar has now gone home to be with the Lord since this story happened. And the idea that Edgar got himself against a wall, not accidentally, he literally put himself in a position where only God could come through. And am I willing? I mean, that's what some of the challenges are throughout this book. Am I willing to put myself in situations where I need God to do God-like things in order for this to work out? I need God to move in God-like ways.
Yeah, the action today seems like could be just a do-gooder thing, could be a simple thing, but given even a little bit of thought, like you said, there was probably there's no coincidence, right? That God is somehow weaving some things together. Today's action is gather some friends and buy groceries or make a meal for someone you think might benefit from extra help this week. Like that doesn't sound like, oh, okay. Like that doesn't sound like my back's against the wall. It doesn't sound like Edgar. The thing I really enjoy about a lot of these actions is you tell these amazing stories that have happened, but then there's like, oh, I can make a meal for someone and it still is going to challenge me in some way to have a reckless faith, trusting God for an outcome.
Yeah, when Carlos reached out to me at that very first interaction we had at the church in Ohio, all he did was say, hey, the next time I'm in your town, why don't we, go out to dinner and see your children's homes? And like big Jesus-sized stories, they start with small steps. I mean, we read in the Bible, it talks about, do not despise these small beginnings, Zechariah 4:10. For the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Like actually faith is about a whole bunch of small stories. And I think today's challenge was just start a story of your own. See if if sharing what you have with someone that's on your radar provokes a conversation, like I don't even want to try to write the next chapter. I just am confident if God challenges you to it, He's got a story there for you.
How did this step go for you?
I was actually, I had a neighbor who had a baby, and I knew that I wanted to make her a meal, and I didn't have time. I didn't have the right ingredients, and I didn't have time to make it happen. And some of you listeners might be in that situation where you have all the right intention, but you can't logistically pull it off. And so I thought, oh, forget it. I'm just not going to do it. And then it's like, something is actually better than nothing. Like, I'll still, Lord, step out. So I whipped together some cookies. I had all those ingredients. That took me like not nearly as much time as a whole meal. I took a plate of cookies over to my neighbor who had just had a baby. And I think she was, I think she felt seen. I think that day, I mean, there's nothing magical about a plate of cookies. They were actually like the excuse. They were like the gateway drug into what it was that God had next. And I don't really know. I don't really know what all will transpire, but I'm not having any more babies. But I think if I had one, she'd be at my house with a plate of cookies.
Our minds are thinking alike, which scares me sometimes. But I was thinking as you were telling the story that this action today, you might not see any fruit of your action of doing this. Somebody might just say thank you and close the door. They might invite you in and you have a great time, but you don't know what the action is doing in the midst of a story that you might just be a blip in. And so you tell the story about a plate of cookies, and then you say, I don't know where that's going, but that's not the point that you even know or that you see the fruition of it.
Yeah, when Carlos offered to come see us in Monterey, it was months before he showed up. And then when he gave us his leftover product, he just happened to decide to go with us to deliver it. But he could have walked away and never known what it was that plate that meat ended up answering a prayer for. Like, sometimes we are not privy to all the things that are going on around us, but that shouldn't stop us from talking ourselves out of that which God might be challenging us to do.
Hey, if you have a reckless faith, a 40-day journey to saying yes, we hope the podcast keeps you focused on having meaningful conversations today with God and with others, and this one in particular with others. You're doing this as a group, most likely. If you're here and haven't yet gotten a copy of the book, if you've kind of stumbled onto this or someone's forwarded you the podcast, you can find the book on Amazon, or for the book and other resources, you can visit backtoback.org/40 days. That's BACK, the number 2, BACK.org/40 days.
I just want to thank you for being on this journey towards a more reckless faith. And until next time.